I love nothing more than to go to my camp alone with a guitar and just let those lyrics and melodies happen.
She had the fly rod in the hand, and the hair was up in a red bandana. It was a red and gold plaid shirt and a pair of jeans and shoes and boots. And I saw that fly rod and looked at her, and I went crazy.
And at 6:15 in the morning, a guy knocked on my window while I was sleeping. He goes, "Well, float plane's leaving at 15. So, okay, I'll get right out. Roll up the window, and the guy traveling with me, I looked at him, I said, I think that was John fucking Gierach.
He said, we started selling it in Tokyo, the Maine IF&W logo merchandise. That'll tell you, I mean, that was being worn in discos, not duck blinds.
Welcome to Flyline Podcast, where we enjoy the interesting stories behind the legendary guides and luminaries connected to Maine fishing. I'm Michael Jones. Today, we'll be talking with our special guest, Gene Bahr. Gene Bahr was born in Wellington, Alabama on May 30th, 1950. Growing up in the rural countryside, he spent his childhood exploring the hills and creeks around him and developing what has become a lifelong love of nature and wildlife. Gene began his career in 1976 as a fish taxidermist. He began fish carving in 1984 and is considered a master fish carver among his peers. Inspired by this relatively new art form, he has watched its popularity quickly growing among everyone from sportsmen to art connoisseurs. He eventually stopped his fish taxidermy practice in 2000 to focus more on catch-and-release fish carving. He has spent his life studying fish anatomy and color, building an extensive collection of profiles, measurements, and photographs of the hundreds of fish that have passed through his studio. This archive allows him to produce beautiful, accurate, and long-lasting reproductions. He has gained a deep understanding of the details of anatomy and color schemes in his work as a taxidermist, as well as his many years as an avid hunter and fisherman. Art has brought him to see color, form, balance, and composition with an artist's eye. The perspectives of naturalist, artist, and taxidermist blend together in each of his wildlife creations. While continuing a successful career in taxidermy, he has expanded into wildlife artistry and now creates with watercolors, oils, ceramics, fiberglass, wood, and bronze. Gene lives in Sebago, Maine in a log cabin he built with his own hands. He has a detached studio and gallery where he can focus on his day-to-day commissions. Gene lives with his partner Donna and his loyal German short-hair pointer Tilly. Gene has a humble personality and is warm, genuine, and caring to anyone that encounters him. In this discussion with Gene, we will explore his relationship with his mentor and close friend, the late David Footer, as well as his life spent learning and perfecting the unique craft that he excels at. It comes with privilege and pleasure to introduce the Flyline Podcast audience to my new friend, neighbor, and talented Maine artist. Gene, welcome to the Flyline Podcast.
Mike, it's a pleasure to be here. We're in my studio here in Sebago, Maine, and good to have you here. And
you got a great story to tell, Gene. You really do. I'm going to kind of tee it up for the audience a little bit that so often in my travels, I'll be in Tom Ackerman's office, I'll be in my doctor's office, I'll be having lunch with an old friend, and someone has a Gene Bahr carving or mount. Gene is not just a taxidermist. Gene is a wildlife artist. And it is just such a pleasure to be sitting in your lair. We're surrounded by carvings and outline drawings. I know that there's a great story to share, Gene, about how you got into this.
From the get-go, I wanted to be a wildlife artist. From the get-go. That's why I took art lessons. But what I learned in 45 years of taxidermy was a stepping stone to finally say I can actually tell people that I am a wildlife artist, and that's what I do with my fish carvings, and I also paint.
Yes.
I do paintings, and occasionally I'll do a serious painting of one or two a year.
Yeah.
Way back when I started in Northeast Alabama as a boy, I was allowed to go down to the creek, or a branch is a small creek down there, So I went down to Brogden Branch, which my grandfather was named Brogden. His last name was Brogden. So I went down by myself, and I had a cane pole and a bobber, and I caught my first fish when I was 5. And I ran home with it on the line and showed everybody my fish. It was a small brim of some sort. And I was raised with my grandparents. I lived in a stone house that my grandfather had built after he was 65, and it had 3 big arches on the porch, and it had big oak trees in the yard, and it had a well in the yard, actually a well that you would drop a bucket down in and haul it up to get a drink of water or to bring water indoors. So I can remember that far back when I was 5 years old, and I stayed with them for my early years, and it was wonderful being with them. And in the evenings, after the dishes were cleaned off the table, my grandfather would get paper out and charcoal and pencils and pastels, and he would draw pictures of the presidents. Like he'd take a thumbnail size picture, and he would enlarge it to life size. And I was awed by that. And so I asked him if I could draw too. So he said, all right, boy. And he put a piece of paper down by there, and he give me a pencil and give me some charcoal. And he showed me how to shadow, by using your finger and smearing the charcoal around on the paper. And he says, well, boy, you're doing good. Well, you just can't imagine what that meant to a 6-year-old boy that was wondering where his parents was.
Yeah.
But I had grandparents that were wonderful. Thank goodness, that they were in my life, and he gave me the encouragement to believe in myself, and those words of encouragement and that little bit of time he spent with me I am the result of that today.
Yeah.
That's where it all started, right there, in Northeast Alabama. I was born a long ways from where I was supposed to be. And my mother was a Southerner from native Alabamian, and my father was from Wisconsin. So I make the analogy that if you've got a beagle and a German short-haired pointer,
Okay.
so what's that dog going to do? Is he going to point birds, be interested in birds, or he's going to be interested in rabbits? And for some reason, as soon as I could get my bearings and start thinking about future, I always wanted to be north. I knew that. And by the time I was 12, I wanted to be going north. So as time went on, I turned 18 in 1968. I was going to get drafted, so I was proactive, and I went and joined the Navy. And I'm still here to tell about it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't fun being some of the things I did and places I went, but I'm here, and I'm in one piece, and I never had to kill anybody, thank God. So I made friends with a guy from Maine, and I came up here in 1970 for like a 3-day visit. We left Norfolk, Virginia, young people, 20 years old. I left Norfolk, Virginia, and was up here, drove straight here, spent a day or so, and then went back to on the ship Monday morning. So I really like what I saw up here. We really got something special in Maine.
Do you remember where you went specifically, Gene, when you came for that day?
Yes, we stayed at my friend's dad's camp on Malsom Lake down in Springville, Maine. And that was I had a very prolific experience there. When I went into the camp, I went to the fireplace, and there was a Dave Footer mount hanging over the mantle, and my jaw dropped open. Because since I was a boy, every time I saw a piece of taxidermy work, I was totally fascinated with it. It didn't matter how ugly or bad it was done. I was still fascinated with it. Well, this was the most beautiful taxidermy work I'd ever seen. And I turned around and asked his father, I says, who did this? He said, Mr. David A. Footer from Lewiston, Maine. And I could tell the reverence that he had for this man, David Footer. So I looked at that and I said, wow, that's what I want to do.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
I think not everyone finds their path, but you have those moments of clarity. You had that moment of clarity right
Yes.
then. What happened next?
Well, I went back to the Navy for a couple of years, and when I got out, I went back to Alabama, planted 6 acres of corn, come up here on vacation in July, and with my wife and my daughter, and I borrowed $200 from my friend and stayed.
That's great. And where did you stay?
Well, I got an apartment in Sanford, Maine,
Sanford, Maine.
and I started working construction.
Yep.
Tell
Tell me about it.
Yeah, I did that for a few years, and I distinctly remember another very important moment in my life when I was living in Porter, Maine, and I had to go to work in Rochester, New Hampshire, which was 53 miles away. Now, if it was snowing outside, that meant I had to get up about 4 o'clock and leave because they really didn't want to hear how far you had to drive or all the excuses that you had to be on the job at 7 o'clock in the morning, ready to go to work. So I remember one morning getting up, and I was 26 years old, and I looked out the window and it was snowing, and I went in to wash my face, and I could not wash my face because my back was hurting so badly. I was a human beast of burden, a construction, a carpenter or a laborer, you're still a beast of burden. So I sat on the edge of the bed that morning, and I said, what can I do? What is it that in this world that I can do? And I said, well, I remember Dave Footer's fish. And I said, I think I would like to be a taxidermist. I mean, I know an odd profession, but that's what I decided to be. And I bought a little book, and I read the book, and I put up a sign in those days, and I became a taxidermist, and that's how I started out, and didn't know a thing about it.
Did you take any community ed classes, or did you go try to mentor with anybody? Or I know you said the book, but
I ran into a fellow at the Skull and Antler banquet in Gorham, Maine, when Dick Arsenault ran it, and his name was Richard Cristoforo, and Richard was far advanced. He'd been a taxidermist already for a dozen years or 15 years, and he was way advanced, really a good taxidermist. And he took me under his wing and answered any questions I had, and give me some tutoring. I didn't go work under him at his studio or anything, but he was there for me anytime I had a question and steered me in the right direction. And also a gentleman named Forrest Hart from Bangor, one of the great taxidermist, and also he was a bronze sculptor. So he would sculpt these life-size moose, and you see some around in your travels. If you see something really it's monumental bronzes, it's probably his. And anyway, I took some tutoring from Forrest, was always very free with his information, and I worked with him a little bit. So I had those two guys, two men that helped me a lot. And not only that, but David Footer, we met a few times, and he never showed me anything, but he set a great example from his work that he turned out, and the kind of person he was made an impression on me. And I got to be friends with David, and we got to know each other quite well. And the last time I saw him was at in Aquasic at the museum up there. And he heard I was going to be there with a display, and him and his wife drove up there. And he was so nice and so complimentary of my work. And we had been friends a long time and equals for a long time. But it took 18 years for me, from the time I started taxidermy in 1976, it took 18 years for me to get David Footer's approval.
a nicer man you could never meet. He was as gentle as they come. I know his daughter, Julie has done a lot of work as well, painting in particular, I know.
Right.
But let's talk about what taxidermy is, because when you say I started doing taxidermy, is that a lot different than what you're doing now? What was taxidermy then?
taxidermy then, there was hardly any information about it.
Right.
That's why I was lucky to have a couple of people I could call up. And I made a lot of mistakes when I first started, but I always tried to do the best I could with what I was provided to work with. So some skins are much better than others.
Only fish, Gene, or are we talking?
No, I did everything.
That's what I
Yeah,
thought. Okay.
I did all the taxidermy, and the taxidermy is the Latin word is taxi, to move, the derma, the skin.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I have a big library with about 100 books over there on the shelves, and I have collected a lot of pictures of animals, all kinds of animals and fishes. I have lots of and folders and files. So when I would go to mount something, I would surround myself with pictures of it, and I learned a lot that way, and basically how things were supposed to look. But the best thing I did when I decided in 1976 to become a taxidermist, and I said, if I'm going to be anything like a good fish taxidermist, I'm going to have to learn art. And I started taking art lessons from a wonderful lady from Springville, Maine, and I was 26 years old. I work all day as construction work, and I drive through Springville, and I stop, and there would be me and 6 or 8 older ladies, because they were all like 50, 60, 70 years old.
Sure.
And Cal Wilson, she was about, I would guess, around 60. And she was a little lady, and she had red lipstick and dressed up, did her hair up and dressed up in bright colors. And so I took lessons from her for about a year and a half. She taught me, you hear this saying that you can see all the colors on a blade of grass, and probably most people think that's bull, but it's not. And she taught me how to see color, and she taught me composition, and she taught me arrangement. And that put me above all other people in the field of taxidermy that had not had any training, because you can do an excellent job on a taxidermy mount or a fish carving or anything. You can do an excellent job mounting it. But if you display it in a poor setting where the composition is not right, then you've destroyed it. Just picture a panel on a wall with a fish on it. What if that fish is too far forward or too far back or too far up or too far down? If it is, then you've destroyed it. It has to be in the proper place on that wooden panel.
I agree with that. I think it's interesting either with writing or art or anything. I can imagine the number of times, Gene, that you walk into this studio after you left it from the day before and you were halfway through the process of working on a fish, painting it, if you will. And the second you walk in and your eyes set on, you had stared at it for 6 hours the day before, but the second your eyes hit it that next morning, you can see a change you want to make or an improvement that you didn't see before because you were just too close to it for too long. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, the good thing about most of these things that I work on is you learn how to make things right. You keep, like especially with fish carvings, it can be erased. Your painting can be erased, or part of your painting can be erased and retouched up again, fixed up. So if you put too many spots in one place and you made a congested area you don't like, you can go in there with an airbrush and a magic wand, I call it.
Yeah.
And you can go in there and fix it,
Yeah.
and change it. But
I think that speaks to what I was trying to say is that sometimes you might make a mistake or get carried away and you have to go back and do it, but redo it. Gene, so we're talking about back in the day. I always think of some of the earliest stuff that Dave was doing, and even halfway through his career, was pulling skins over of a dead fish over a foam or a block of wood or whatnot.
Right.
And that's how you started.
that's taxidermy, yes.
That's taxidermy.
Yeah.
Tell me about the first time you attempted to carve a fish out of a block of wood. Do you remember that?
I remember doing a couple of very small ones to start with, like 8-inch trout, and I did a couple of small ones. And then I think it was 86, I decided I was going to do something elaborate, and I carved a 5-pound brook trout swimming over rocks, three-dimensional piece, and I took it to the Maine Sportsman Show, and back in those days, their art show was unbelievable. They indeed had the best in the state. Everybody would emerge on the Maine Sportsman Show, and they would, all the best carvers, all the best painters would emerge, and there was like 250 paintings, 175 carvings entered in those days, and now it's nothing like that. So I entered my first entry that I'd ever entered in there with everybody in the whole state, and that fish got third best of show and best fish. So I was thrilled and to do that, and I carved the rocks out of wood, and it had a nice bend in it. It was a nice composition. And the next year I entered like a 6-pound brown trout, and I won the best of show the next year. So that was getting my reputation started as a wood carver, and I was still doing fish taxidermy all the way up until 2000. And in 2000, I stopped doing fish taxidermy and just started carving fish.
I think I know why. Tell me why.
I would go down every September at the end of, basically after the end of fishing season, and I'd have a large chest-type freezer full of dead fish. And the reason they were dead is that they were going to be mounted. And I really thought of this in 1990. I started carving catch and release carvings. And I was carving them as fast and as well as I could carve them. And charging $600 for an average fish carving in those days in 1990. So as time went on, I got better at it and faster at it. And I just stopped doing it, the taxidermy on fish in 2000. And I usually do around 20 or 25 carvings a year on average since 1990. Mm-hmm. I think I've carved around 600 fish.
But back to getting away from taxidermy.
Right.
I think you were doing it for conservation reasons as well. You touched on it. Like
yes.
Maybe catch and release really meant something to you.
Yes.
Maybe people were coming to you with the same mindset. I would hate to see a trophy fish get killed just to have it mounted and stuffed on a wall.
Right.
Because those big fish aren't really that great to eat.
Well, you take a 3 or 4 or 5 pound brook trout in the state of Maine as a trophy.
Yes.
And I mean, it's a wonderful thing. And this creature has come from an egg to this great living creature. If you want a brook trout to eat, which I do all the time, I go catch an 8 or 10 inch brook trout in a brook somewhere, and I eat all the brook trout I want.
They're delicious.
Yes, and I would never think of keeping a big brook trout to eat, but people have egos and they want to show off the dead fish, even, to put it in their freezer and pull it out, and I understand that. But anyway, and I understand everyone cannot afford my fish because they're not cheap, but you do get a big bang for your dollar. I do work hard and I don't make a lot of money, but it takes a long time to do one of these fish.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's more to it than just the memory. It truly is a piece of art. You go and look at the walls of LL Bean, or you go into any place that has a Gene Bahr mount, and it just draws you in. Danny has a number of them, or a couple of them at least, had them in the Maine Guide Fly Shop, and there wouldn't be one morning I'd walk by and I wouldn't stop to appreciate. They look so real, Gene. They just are. You have a rare talent. You have an eye. And again, I can't emphasize, it's not taxidermy, it's art. You're a wildlife artist, and that's incredible. Did you make some mistakes early on?
Oh, yeah. Of course, years of mistakes.
Ones that you could correct?
Not always, but, big people, they don't know a lot about taxidermy and stuff, and they look good to them, but I might see flaws with it, and it's hard to get perfection. You can try. Even today, I've been at this for almost 50 years, and even today, I can strive for perfection, but very rarely do I achieve it.
Oh, I think you do. I think you're understated. I think your work is incredible and so impressed by it.
One thing I wanted to say about my carvings is one thing I like is putting some action, conservative action in my fish. I have the head down, tail down, maybe head a bow in the body, and the fins. I like them hugging the body, and I like to have the mouth slightly open. I want the fish that I carved to look like it could possibly move forward. And another thing I like is when I paint the fish, I got this technique that I make it soft. It's soft looking, like you could go up and press your finger into the body of it, like a real fish.
I like that.
And I do that with a combination of artist brush and airbrush. The airbrush is a magic wand, and I can create things with that I could never do with just using an artist brush.
So what is an airbrush for the audience, Gene? I know what an airbrush is, but explain to the audience what an airbrush is and what kind of paint you use.
The airbrush is a little tiny air gun that is about as big as a person's index finger, and you can get the tiniest little spray with it, up to maybe a couple of inches spray. But it's for doing fine work. And I use acrylic paint. I used to use a lacquer paint, but it started affecting my health. And so I just learned how to use acrylics, airbrush paint, and I also use acrylic paints that you buy at Walmart or anywhere.
Yeah. With
an artist brush. But I got my technique and my recipe that it's taken many decades to develop.
Yeah.
This recipe, when I go start to finish my recipe, I know what I'm getting at the end. I already know before I even start what it's going to look like at the end. And it's been a long, long road to get to where I am today.
So, yeah, where you started and where you are, you've turned it into a successful business. You said you're not getting rich doing this, but you were able to make a living. Tell us about the transition.
Well,
hanging out your shingle, saying, I'm here to do this.
Yes.
At
first, I worked construction and did taxidermy on weekends and things when I could. But somewhere around 1981 or 82 or somewhere along in there, I moved to Sebago, but I started getting serious about it. I started having children. My second, I had two sons. I have a daughter from my first marriage,
mm-hmm.
and then so I've got two sons, my second marriage, and my family was growing, and so I had to get serious about really working. And if you're going to make a living at taxidermy, you better be serious about working, and you cannot go buy a new truck and put a bright, shiny sign on it and expect that you're going to be paying for that truck. It's a tough business. I mean, I'm dealing in hundreds, not thousands, in hundreds. So
yeah,
you really have to come out here every morning at 8 o'clock, and you got to work to 6 o'clock just about every day, 6 or 7 days a week,
yeah.
to get by and make a living at it.
Yeah, and what I'm looking at behind Gene is a long list, and I mean 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper glued together of potential work you have in the future. So you have a backlog of work ahead of you.
Yeah, usually it's more like 10 or 15 pieces ahead of me.
Isn't that great?
These are a list that most of them have been done on.
Yeah. So people come to you after they've caught a trophy fish. Maybe photos, dimensions, a story. Tell me about how someone engages Gene Bahr.
Well, a lot of my customers are from away. From Canada, and from I just did work for people in Michigan, New Mexico, Texas, Wyoming. So I get calls from all over the place, and they're not going to come here and meet me. And I get calls from up down the coast. It could be Connecticut or Maryland or Massachusetts, but a lot of if they live here in around Maine, like in New England, they can come see me if they want to. But a lot of the conversation will be a man would call me from say New Mexico, and he might not even call me. He may email me. I may never see him.
Right.
And he wants to commission a 24-inch rainbow trout. So I'll say, well, this is what I need from you. This is first you got to establish a price, and I give him the price, and if he agrees to it, then I say I need a third down for a deposit.
Yeah,
and send me. I'll be waiting for your check, and because once they send me a check, I am working for them. Then otherwise, it doesn't mean nothing to me until I get the check. It's all talk. So once I get my deposit and a picture, I don't want to be inundated with pictures, but he can even email those to me, and I can print off. Just send me one or two good pictures and what you want the color to look like.
Yeah. Or
sometimes they fade, so you give me instructions. You want more of this or more of that. Tell me what you want, and then once I get the deposit, I will. I have got hundreds and hundreds of drawings of fish that were dead when they brought them in, and I drew them. I drew those fish and I measured them. So you got a pretty good idea. I mean, if a guy's got a 24-inch rainbow, I get my rainbow templates out and go through and find some 23, 24, 25-inch ones, and I look them over and I say, oh, geez, this one looked really like his fish.
Yeah.
But it might be an inch shorter, but you can expand that,
Yes.
That with experience. You can expand that drawing to fit his. And once you get a drawing that I like the looks of, I send him the drawing, and I have one for myself. And he can keep the drawing, but he looks at it and he sends me the approval, or if he wants any changes made. And that's about it. And then it usually takes 8 to 12, 14 months, and I give them a contract. I'll draw a contract out with their name on it, address, phone number, and an estimated time when I'm going to have it done, and what they want done, and the cost of it, and what they sent me for a deposit, their check number, and the date.
Sure.
And all that is sent to them, and I have a copy here of that same contract.
Yeah.
Because it's a duplicate copy.
So, good, better, best. You said you try to establish a price for the work you're going to do. You have different tiers of work that you do. You do. I notice you have what you call 3D.
Right.
Tell me about the different when you approach. They come to you with a fish, and then your next thing is, well, here are some ideas I have.
Right.
Tell me about that.
The sky is the limit.
Right.
Whatever you can dream up, I can do. But this is depending on if your wallet has a limit. Because you have your standard, say, 24-inch brook trout that I do a lot of those from Canada and from Maine. Not too many from Maine, but I do a lot of 20 to 24-inch brook trout, 26-inch brook trout. So the standard fish is just I got kind of a rule of thumb how I charge, But if a guy's got a 24-inch brook trout and he says he wants it 3D, well, all of a sudden you're starting to talk some serious. To me, it's pretty serious money.
That's because it's two eyes. You can see both sides.
You got to do 3D so you can walk around it, and you got to have a base for it, and you got to carve rocks for it, and you got to put it on a display that when you walk around that 3D, it's supposed to look good to excellent from all angles.
Yes.
So you increase the price drastically.
Right.
And
that's the premium package.
Yeah. Yeah. So to give you a gist, a 24-inch brook trout would run about $2,000 for a wall mount.
For a wall mount, not
then you want one for a 3D would run you about $4,000 for the trout and about $500 for the base and the wooden rocks and the habitat.
Yeah.
So that's a gist. And I would require third down, and the rest when the job's completed.
Sure.
And that's basically how I've always operated, and since I started.
So, Gene, you know, we live in a world of old men and fish. You ever have someone die on you before you finish their fish?
I'm trying to think, you know.
Or have you been lucky enough to get it across the finish line before that happened?
Well, I can't remember ever not getting paid.
There you go.
You know, I guess if somebody did die, their wife or their son or somebody came and paid for it. But I can't remember an instant when that happened.
I think it's an honest question. Well, Gene, I think it's time for us to take a quick break and come back and learn more about your carving work.
Okay, sounds good.
During one of my recent visits with Gene, I was able to capture a live recording of Gene performing a song he wrote about growing up in Alabama. In lieu of a historical flyline flashback, I want to share this wonderful and touching piece with the audience to enjoy as well.
It's an old guitar. It's a Gibson, and I bought it in 1966, but it was made in 1963. And I've had it all these years. It's been a great friend. This is a song I wrote called When I Was Just a Boy. When I was just a boy, living way down south, I remember evenings sitting on the porch, the sun going down over the Blue Ridge Hills, listening to the sounds of the crickets and the whippoorwills. When I was just a boy, living way down south, I remember evenings sitting on the porch, the family gathered round, talking soft and low, listening to the sounds of the crickets and the whippoorwills. Mama would turn to me with a smile on her face and say, "Son, would you bring your guitar out and play the wildwood flower? Play it soft and sweet. You know you play it like nobody else can do. Oh, play the wildwood flower, play the wildwood flower, play the wildwood flower just for me. Oh, play the wildwood flower, play the wildwood flower, play the wildwood flower just for me." Now double pick it, son.
And now let's return to the second part of our show. Gene, I know that wood carvers rely on different species of wood. What do you use for your carvings, that you can get handily here in Maine?
I prefer basswood, and it's commonly used by most carvers to carve fish and waterfowl decoys. So it's indigenous to southern Maine. I don't know where its limits are, but it grows around the old fields and farmlands and things like that. And it has the biggest leaf in the woods. The leaves are as big as a man's head. And they're kind of heart-shaped. And what I like about basswood is plentiful, and it doesn't have any resin in it. Like white pine has resin in it. Well, you don't have to contend with that with basswood. And that's why I like basswood.
No knots.
It's got knots in it, and you try to avoid those, by using the part of the wood that doesn't. And what I usually do is I have it cut up into slabs, like an inch and a half, 2 inches thick, and then I'll glue it with carpenter's glue to thickness that accommodates the size of the fish that I'm carving and the bend in the fish, like looking at it from the top. They usually have a head out, tail out, or head in, tail out, or some bend in them. So if you're putting a stream bend in, like a leaping salmon, you would want a pretty good thick piece of wood. And then I cut the wood out that I don't want with a bandsaw, and a draw knife is a knife with 2 handles on it, and any power tools that I can use to get the wood away and find the fish that's inside that block and bring it out to something that looks real and lifelike.
So you look at a block of wood that you've laminated and you try to see a fish living inside of it. And it's your job to bring it out.
I know if I use my recipe and my technique and my templates that I have drawn out, that I can make that block of wood into a lifelike sculpture.
So you take a resource that's local and available to you. Do you kiln dry it at all, Gene? Or
no, I just put it in my cellar, and if you put a dehumidifier in your cellar, you can make it a useful space. Otherwise, it gets too wet.
So in that process, you're actually removing the moisture without using heat
exactly
in a traditional sense.
Yeah, and if you just left it outside, it takes a year for an inch of wood to dry. So it would take a couple of years for an inch and a half, 2-inch board to dry out. If it was stick dried outside, and I do stick dry it outside, but I bring it in the shop, in the cellar of the shop, where it's real dry, and for several months before I actually use it to carve a fish.
And the fins?
The fins are also carved with thin slices of basswood. Yeah. And with a bandsaw, I can cut thin pieces or any size piece I want.
I can see you have a Fordham tool here.
Yes.
I'm sure you do some burning.
Yes.
And so you have to, just take yourself through carving the fish. You got a block of wood. You're going to buck it down to this. You must do a profile on the outside of the block of wood to give you a sense of the measurement, and then start taking away from there.
Well, a lot of the carvings, the bigger ones, I actually, once I've roughed the fish out, I will split them down the center with a bandsaw, and I'll hollow them out.
Oh,
and
wow.
That lightens them up tremendously, like approximately 50% of the weight I can take out of it. And if it's a Atlantic salmon, I do those about 60%. In other words, I take a board that's big enough to accommodate the thickness of the fish, looking at it from the top, and I'll make it maybe 60% thick, so as I can get the ventral fins down by the belly. I can get those ventral fins in comfortably instead of just trying to make it a half size, and also hollow out the back with a little circular chainsaw, and I remove a lot of wood and a lot of weight. Even so, you've hollowed it out. That's still quite a lot of weight to be moving around with one hand. That's my technique. I have them on a post so I can move them from one vise to hang them on the wall. And you're always moving these fish around. They don't just stay in one place because you have all these steps that you're doing. And, from roughing it out to fine tuning it to using a palm sander and sanding the body down and getting it really smooth. And it's kind of like building a house, because once you get it roughed out, you say, wow, look at him go. But then when it comes to the finished work, it comes to a standstill and it slows right down.
The devil's in the details.
Yes, and it takes a lot of time to do the details, and you can just keep working things basically until you get them right. And with paintings, the same thing. I kind of sculpt with painting. I imagine the in depth of the fish, the colors that's most into the fish, and I go in there and I put them down first, and I keep adding colors till I bring out the exterior color of the fish. And the subtleties at the very end of it with that airbrush, it just softens things up and brings them to life, you know.
Your fish look really alive to me for one other reason is I love the lacquer that you use. It makes them look wet.
Well, it's exciting when you get a fish painted. Let's say you got a nice brook trout, 20-inch brook trout, and you've got it all painted. And I scrape the eye off because there's a glass eye in there. So I scrape the paint off the eye, and I put 6 coats of lacquer over it, and it really comes to life. I mean, just in a few minutes, you know, and it's so gratifying. It's a God-given talent, that, and I'm not just saying that. I believe God gave me a gift, a special ability that is something extraordinary to me, that I have this gift, and I'm awed by it. When I finish a fish, I look at the fish, and I can't believe I did it. I mean, it's hard to believe, and it's the scary part. Someday I'm going to come in here and not remember how to do it.
You know, I'm going to keep saying this, Gene. You're an artist first, and there must come to a point in the day where you just have to say, I need to stop.
Well, when you're doing a big salmon, let's say you got a 48-inch Atlantic salmon that you're working on. Well, every one of them scales is carved in individually, and every one of them is painted several times, because you can't do it in 1 or 2 times. It's a sculpture, like I was talking about, and you have to keep going over and over and over it with the artist brush on each scale, over and over, and there's thousands of scales on them. So you can get pretty monotonous after a while. So a lot of times I'll work like a couple of hours making scales, carving them, or painting scales, but I'll turn the radio on, get some good music on, relax, enjoy it, and I'll get up, go take a coffee break, have some snack or something, and then come back, work for another hour or so, and maybe I'll just completely turn my attention to another project.
Yeah, so I can see behind you, Gene, you've got 1, 2, 3 fish going right now. So these 3 are all look like they're about in the same step of the process. They've now been painted. The woodwork and the carving has been completed. And so you'll do sometimes multiple fish at a time just so you can be more efficient with your time resources. And also, you know, you don't have to clean your airbrush every time because you're going to do it for 3 fish all at once.
Exactly. I try to work in 3 and 4s. You know,
you do,
just depending on the size of the fish.
Yeah.
And like if you got a 3-dimensional fish going, you might as well count that as 2 fish. So you would only want to do 2 3-dimensional fish at once. And but if it's just a catch and release fishies that are going on wooden panels, you know, I might do 4 at a time. But it's feasible. You know, you're trying to, when you're in a fin making mode, you might do all those fins, cut all those fins out at once, make all those fins at once, and shape all those bodies at once.
Yeah.
But with 3 or 4, I can remember whose fish I'm working on and what I'm trying to achieve with that particular fish. But if you get going with too many of them, it can get confusing. You know?
Yeah. No, you and I talked earlier about no one's going to get rich being a wildlife artist, and you have to be disciplined.
Yes.
You talked to me a little bit about your work schedule. You get up in the morning. Take me from there.
Well, used to, my work schedule was 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, most days. Back when I was in my heyday of doing taxidermy, and I would do 15 or 20 carvings a year, and 80 or 100 taxidermy pieces a year. Back in my heyday, I went one person doing this, and a tremendous amount of work, hard work. So now I'm semi-retired, and my main objective in life is, at this point in my life, is to be happy. And I might not get out here till 10 o'clock in the morning. I'll get up in the morning and have breakfast and take the dog for a walk and play my guitar for 30 minutes and then come out and go to work and work till 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock and go in for the evening, or not work at all. I might just go fishing or hunting that day, So it's pretty nice at this my age, I wish I wasn't old, but at least I'm free.
You look great.
I can get I can get out and still get around. I'm pretty agile for my age.
Yeah. So this year, Gene bird hunted, moose hunted, and deer hunted.
Yes.
And put in a lot of time on his feet.
Yeah.
And you like doing that.
And before we did that, my friend Bill Fisher and I built a camp up in Newry this year.
Oh, he did.
Yeah. So the two of us built that camp, and that was a lot of work and a lot of fun, a lot of hard work too.
Were you telling me that's on the Androscoggin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's near the Androscoggin River.
You mentioned that.
Newry.
In one of our previous meetings. Gene, you showed me last time we visited, you used a horseshoe.
Yes.
To help mount, was it a bird?
Yes, I have a...
Yeah. What's your inspiration for some of your... So a three-dimensional piece of work that you're doing may have a base like you talked about earlier. You've had some pretty intricate ideas come through your brain and across, through your work and your finished product. Tell me about some of the inspirational things that you've taken away that you've seen. Some ideas.
With this particular piece is a house wren that I'm working on. It's a tiny little bird that's very quiet and very, very shy little bird. You don't see them a lot, but they're one of the most beautiful little creatures. But I carved this little wren out of tupelo. And the tupelo comes from down south on the swamps. And it's really the best wood that I know of for getting fine detail, like feather detail, And so I carved the bird out of it. I got excited about the bird. And a lot of times bird carvers will just have a little round base and they'll put a piece of driftwood on the base and they'll put the bird on the driftwood. Well, I don't want to do that. I really love what I've done so far with the house wren, and I was trying to think of a good composition and display for this small bird, and I was at my outside water faucet, and I noticed some horseshoes that were laying there.
Yeah.
And I picked the biggest one. It was off one of those big draft horses, and I said, now, wouldn't that be nice to have that horseshoe coming out of some dark farm dirt with some rusty colored leaves, and you got that little rusty colored house wren attached to the horseshoe that I will also carve out of wood, and it will look old and rusty on this beautiful hardwood base with this setting. And I said, this is what you call a kicker, and it's something that you can do it with fish carvings or anything, but you can make somebody want it. They wouldn't ordinarily, when they come in the studio and to my gallery and look around, they had no intentions of buying anything when they come in, but they see something that so nice and so beautiful that they want it. They want to own it and take it home.
I want to take that piece you have in your studio. For the audience, Gene, we're sitting in Gene's workshop, but he has a beautiful studio on the front of the building. And I want you to think giant brook trout, beautiful finished product. But I love the one you have are they little 6-inch stream brookies? There's 2 of them.
Yeah, I've carved quite a few of those, generally around 7 or 9 inch trout or foot long. But those are my favorite because that's what I usually catch. And my wife, Donna, and I live an unusual lifestyle because we have a big garden and we live a lot out of the garden, and I will go fishing and bring home my limited brook trout, and we'll sit down, have garden vegetables and salad out of the garden, and eat those brook trout, and just be in heaven on earth, you know. And then it's king's food. It's food that no matter how much money you got, you cannot buy brook trout.
No.
And a wild brook trout. So when I do harvest a deer, which is generally get one every year, most of the time. But anyway, my point is that when we get one, it's a celebration. It's a Thanksgiving, and we'll process that deer ourselves and enjoy eating the deer over the next year, and talk about how good it is, and how what great food that is, pure food that you got yourself. The most honest way to get food is that you can get it is to get it yourself, to harvest it yourself off the land.
Well, and there's, Gene and I live in the same area. I live in Naples, and here we are in Sebago. You could almost hunt with a baseball bat around here. There's so many deer now. There's more deer now than there was when I was a kid. I think it's just because of all the development. They can live right in your backyard, and you can't shoot a rifle within 400 feet of a home. So that does that. We talked a little bit about Dave Footer before. For the audience, Dave Footer was really kind of a predecessor to Gene Bahr, I would say. Right? He was doing it before you were. If you go into any place in New England and you see a gorgeous brook trout, mounted or carved, there's going to be a 50-50 chance it's either you or Dave. Do you remember the first time you met Dave Footer?
I think he came to my studio in Porter, Maine, about 1978 or 9. He was just come in, kind of looking around. He was over that way, and I guess he'd heard about me or something. But anyway, he come stopped in, and I knew who he was. He was like God to me. He was friendly and everything, and but he didn't volunteer any information, you know.
Do you feel like he viewed you as a competitor?
Probably not at first, you know.
Yeah.
And as time went on, of course, it got better. Yeah, it got better, and then there's like I said earlier, it took 18 years for him to consider me an equal.
Yeah.
Like he said, he was looking at Danny Legier's lake trout. Danny had the lake trout in a booth at the Maine Sportsman Show, and he came and he stood and looked at that lake trout for a long time. Danny was telling me his story, and he says he said Gene finally got it. And this was 18 years after I started.
This is Dave Footer talking.
Yes,
Gene finally got it.
Yeah. So I felt really good.
Well, I imagine wildlife art is like anything, playing guitar or even just painting or photography. The more you do it, the more consistently you do it, the better you get at it, and the results are just amazing. And you live with an artist, Donna.
Oh my goodness.
Her work is incredible.
She's the light of my life.
Tell me about Donna.
Yeah, she has been an art teacher for decades, and she taught in Bridgeton at the Adult Learning Center, and she teaches at the Naples Library now. And she's always got classes going on, but she has taught a lot of people. She has opened the door to color to a lot of people in this area around here. And she's one of my critics. She comes in and it's funny, if I'm doing something and she finds fault with it, then, she tactfully tells me. Now I do the same thing for her.
Yeah.
But she's the love of my life. She's beautiful. I tell her she's beautiful. I tell her I love her every day.
Yeah. Yeah, she is beautiful. I'm sure you love her. She seems very lovable. She's a hugger. I'm a hugger. Yeah. And kind. It doesn't take long. I've only met Donna a couple times now, and she's just as sweet as the day is long. How did you meet her? How were you introduced to Donna?
Well, I met her many, many years ago. My boys were homeschooled, and she homeschooled her son also. So they all became friends. And I hadn't seen Donna in years and years, and I'd gotten divorced, and so I joined the Bridgeton Chamber of Commerce, and one May day, in the end of May, about May 23rd, I believe it was, I went on the Songo River Queen because they were having the monthly after-hours meeting, and I ran right smack into her there, and that was it.
Yeah.
Sparks flew. It was unbelievable. It's like songs are written about, poetry is written about. It's true. Sparks really did fly.
I can see the spark between you both. You clearly love each other deeply, and should all have that kind of love in our life. You talked about music. I know from speaking with some other people that know you that you're quite accomplished with the guitar.
Well,
tell me about your background with playing, and you play out a little bit too.
Yeah, once in a while. I started when I was probably 13 or 14, and started playing music with my uncles, and they took me some time to show me how to pick a couple of songs. And I'm not a real good guitar player. I can't do a lot of picking, but I can strum the chords, and I can remember the words to a lot of songs. I don't know. And I can play the harmonica with the guitar and sing a song at the same time.
That's fantastic.
And I also write songs, but I don't expect I'll ever be a millionaire at that either. make any money to speak of. But I have played out a few times, and have played for money a couple of times.
But it's a passion you have.
It's a passion I have, and I enjoy doing it. And
Can I take a guess, Gene? Americana.
Yeah, country, Western Americana.
Yeah.
Old rock,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Seems like it would fit right into your gun barrel.
Yes.
Who are some of your inspirations in terms of artists?
Oh, Johnny Cash, of course, and Glenn Campbell I liked a lot, and Merle Haggard shows. Those are some great guys.
How can you not like them?
That's some of the best. George Jones,
Yeah.
Bob Dylan.
So you, Gene, you didn't really apprentice underneath anybody. Has anyone ever come to you and recognized you as a wildlife artist and said, I want to learn how to do this? Would you be willing to show me the early steps of how to do it? Has anyone ever approached you?
Yes, I've had a couple of students in the taxidermy practice. I had a couple I took in, and they didn't last long.
No.
They usually don't last long. No, they have good intentions, but it was kind of a disappointment. So and so when people want to learn it, and they come to me to learn taxidermy or to learn anything, carving or anything, I just tell them, here's a book, here's where your sources are, go get the information. And there's some schools out there that teach it. And I said, if you taxidermy a piece and you want to bring it over, I'll be glad to look at it and critique it for you and help you improve. But nobody's ever done that.
But I believe, in speaking with Will Lund, that you serve as a judge for the Maine Sportsman Show, or you have in the past.
I do.
Do I have that right?
Currently, I usually do it.
So you don't know who the artist is, you just see the piece.
Sometimes you know who the artist is, because if they keep entering into the competition and you meet them and they ask you maybe a question or something, some questions, then after a while you get to know them and you get to know their work. So you can at times tell whose work is whose.
Yeah.
And you try to be biased and everything, but it's not always possible after you get to know a person's certain mark of their work. It's like you could, like we were talking about David Footer, you could walk into a room and you could see his work across the room at 100 feet. It's like, that's David Footer.
That's right.
Work there,
my friend Steve Bahr just inherited a Dave footer mount from a friend who had passed, and it has just incredible value to him in many ways.
Sure.
Like the first fish you saw from Dave had
Right.
a value of impression. It impressed you when just to see it. Gene, what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, I've carved around 600 fish, good fish, nice ones. They look good. I don't know of anybody else in the world that's carved 600 nice fish. And I guess I want to be one of the greatest fish carvers, one of the greats.
I think you are one of the greats. And I also think that you carry a unique card too, in that I think you were really working on the cusp of when we were going from killing fish to being able to replicate their beauty without having to kill them.
Right.
And you maybe were one of two people that were successful at actually doing it, because to use the skin of a fish, you've already got a template right there. You had to recreate it from wood,
Right.
from nothing. Mm-hmm. And that truly is art. Perfect timing, Donna. Come right in. Yeah, we were expecting you. For the audience, this is Donna. Gene told me a little bit about how he met you on the Songo Queen one night when you guys were reunited after knowing your children had been homeschooled together.
Yeah.
He shared some things that I'm not going to repeat. They were all good.
Okay.
Tell me who he is. Tell me who Gene Bahr is to you, Donna.
Well, he's my best friend. He's the love of my life. He's a pretty neat guy. If he can handle me and have the patience he has with me, yeah, he's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he seems like he has pretty strong conviction. Is he an easy guy to be around?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah.
No one will shoot things straighter to you than Gene. You can always trust his honesty. One of his best friends calls him his true north.
Guiding line.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. I don't think any conversation about Gene Bahr, especially a contemporary conversation with Gene Bahr, can't be more complete without your artwork. Is incredible, Donna. I mean, I've just had a couple of glimpses of it. I'm going to have some photos that are going to be on our the blogs page of our website regarding this, and I hope that the audience takes the opportunity to look at those. And some of them are great pieces that you've done. I love the portrait of Gene with Tilly.
Oh, yes.
And you showed me some pieces earlier of English setters. Little snow just fell off the roof.
And we did.
Tell me about your own work with art. I know Gene mentioned that you've done some teaching.
Oh, yes. A lot over the years. I started teaching little kids, and then grown-ups wanted to take my classes. And then they hired me at the Learning Center, and I was there for almost 14 years.
In Bridgeton.
Yep, Casco and Bridgeton. We had two learning centers. And adult ed, I'm just now getting back into that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, had to take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So two artists came together in Sebago, Maine, and live under the same roof and get to inspire each other every day.
Yep.
Yeah. Does he ever critique your work at all?
Not anymore.
No. Doesn't. Probably there's no room for it, is there, Gene?
No, she does a beautiful job.
Yeah. Yeah.
He asked me one morning, he said, can I tell you something about that painting and some owls that I had painted? I turned around and I said, no.
I'm not going to ask you what you were going to say.
No, he was absolutely right.
Hey, guys, I'm curious. The white birch you use, Gene, for mounting your fish on, not always, but sometimes.
Yeah.
That must be a hard thing to find.
Well, you get an eye for it. So I can spot a white birch through the woods a long ways.
Yeah.
And what I'm looking for is dead white birch laying down horizontal.
Okay.
That's what I use.
Oh.
So I'll go out with my chainsaw, and Donna comes and helps me. We'll get a sled. So I got to tell you this story. We were down by the old railroad tracks, and so I will go across, and I'm going up over the rocks and everything, and I'm heading toward the white birch out there that I'd spotted, and Donna walks down the road, and she's gonna intersect with me, but there's some water there, and she's gonna get across the water. So I said, that water's too, I knew the water was over her boots. And she took a step in that water and went right forward. I didn't know she was going to step in. I would have stopped her, but she stepped in that water and went right forward and got wet. And I tried not to laugh, but I still laughed. Once I saw she was okay.
Yeah. Was this wintertime or?
No, spring, early spring.
Cold then.
It was cold. Yeah.
Was that the end of the birch harvesting quest? Or
No, we got our
Oh,
bark.
we-
We went in and got our bark, and it wasn't that cold.
Yeah.
And but what you do is you go in and like a lot of times you're surprised to, but when you're charging $300 or $400 for a birch panel, handmade panel, it better be nice. It better look good. You can't just use any piece of bark. So I go in and you take a big birch that looks really good, and there may not be one piece on there fit to use. So you might go to another piece and say, "Oh, look, what a find! We've got 5 pieces on this tree here, this old dead tree that's fallen down. We got 5 panels on here that we can cut. So we'll cut them with a chainsaw. We'll cut them the width basically is what you're cutting, and you cut along, and then you roll the log over and you cut down the dark side of the white birch, and that way you've got dark on the left and dark on the right of your panel, and light in the middle where your fish is going. So then we bring them back here and glue them to a piece of wood, and wrap them with raffia and cherry canning.
Do you need to steam them at all? It looks like maybe oh no, I see. You drill holes. You're going to use rattan or something like that?
Yeah.
Raffia. It's a grass that you can buy at the hobby stores.
And caning.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's beautiful. So you don't have to steam it then. It just rolls out flat for you.
Well, when I bring it home, it's still flexible.
Yeah.
So I take and I'll lay it down flat and I'll put weight on it.
Okay.
And it dries that way.
Okay.
It dries flat.
Yeah. Amazing.
And then you glue it to a piece of plywood, and you glue the birch bark and you glue the plywood, and you really adhere those 2 pieces together with pressure.
Yeah.
And then the next day you've got yourself the beginning of a birch bark panel.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I don't think that's really, it is unique to your style. I've seen other carvers do something like that, but I could see anyone who's an artist wanting to incorporate using white birch, because it's such a beautiful texture.
Well, I'll tell you what happened was way back in the early 1900s, Herbie Welch was the one that influenced David Footer. So you can see a lot of Herbie Welch's work at the Quasic Museum. In his day and time, he was the man. He tied flies, he mounted fish, he guided, he did it all. And he even guided President Eisenhower.
He made hooks. He used to cast hooks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So he started out doing this birch bark panels on a lot of his fish.
Yeah.
With quintessential Maine, brook trout, salmon, birch bark panel. That's it. So then David Footer come along. He continued to do that. So then it took me a while to figure out how to do that, how to get these panels, how to make them. They just you're not going to just go out in the woods and get a piece of birch bark and make one of these anytime soon. And it's going to take a while to learn how to do them.
Some tribal knowledge, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing and what I do with these birch bark panels and these fish that I'm carving with the brook trout and the salmon is I create quintessential Maine artwork, sporting art, Maine sporting art. That's what I do. Like if you catch a fish in Wyoming, and it's still going to be a beautiful fish in Wyoming, but it's not going to be a Maine sporting art.
Okay.
It's going to be Wyoming fish.
Yeah.
We don't have brown trout in Maine that look like the ones I got in Wyoming.
No, they don't. So would you put a brown trout from Wyoming on a Maine birch bark?
If they really wanted to, I would, but I would, it would probably, I don't even know if they have birch trees in Wyoming. So I would do it if a customer requested it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's still not the same as a Maine brook trout or salmon on birch bark. You've got it's all about Maine, or you could include New Hampshire and maybe Vermont, but
Just because we're talking about it, Gene, I'm fascinated. Your birch bark, for the audience, he's showing the white part of the birch that's coming out. You can flip birch around and it'll be like this most impressive color of beige.
right.
Have you ever?
I've never done that.
Yeah.
And I know they make fishing crewels like that
Yes.
also,
Yeah.
but I always use the white part.
Okay, so let's make a deal. I'm going to go to Labrador with Tom Ackerman this springtime.
Yeah.
If I get a brook trout 5 pounds or larger,
Yeah.
let's try it.
We can do that.
All right.
And I also have some pink birch.
You do?
That I found some pink birch, and I'm waiting for on occasion I use that. And
Well, I'm comfortable with my masculinity. I think I can handle that.
good. Anyway, we have options, but I'll be glad to do that for you. That will be a first timer for me.
Right.
Gene, you are going to go down as being one of the greatest wildlife artists that's ever contributed to the sporting community, and have certainly earned the title of being a legend and a luminary in the Maine fishing community as a result of the iconic work that you've done. It's everywhere. It's in everyone's office and home, doctor's offices, LL Bean. Anywhere you go, you see it everywhere. And 600 fish, I'm surprised there's not more. But in some ways, how could there be more? It takes so much to build one.
Angus King has one of his fish hanging in the office in Washington, D.C.
What is it?
There's a brook trout and the salmon doing a double strike on them. They're both chasing the same fly on a handmade birch bark panel.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Did he commission it or did
No, they wanted it as a loan, so I loaned it to him to display Maine art in his office.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
You like
deal.
that. Well, it means everything that you took the time to speak to me today, Gene and Donna. Thank you for joining in at the conversation at the tail end.
Mike.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate the nice comments, and it's been a pleasure having you here in my studio. And
Welcome back anytime.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for joining us for this intimate discussion, and thank you for listening to Flyline Podcast. A new Flyline Podcast episode will be released every 2 weeks on Tuesdays, so be sure to come back to meet our next famous guest. Until then, this is Michael Jones, and we invite you to visit the blog section of our website to enjoy photos and contributions from our guests and experience all of our episodes at flylinepodcast.com.